Hello guys, welcome to my channel, Full on Drama. Today I have brought you 5 Reddit petty revenge stories. Story 1. Farted in kid's face at inflatable park. I'll keep it short and sweet. I took my 2.5-year-old girl to our local indoor inflatable park. She was loving it. She was so happy jumping around just being a kid. As she climbed the steps up to the top of a slide, here comes a 6-7-year-old barreling up the steps as well. He pushes her out of the way and she falls face first down the steps and begins to cry. I knew we would have to seek revenge as a father-daughter team, so I swiftly snatched her up and we began to ascend the 10-15 steps up to the top of the inflatable slide together. As my stomach rumbled, I realized we had timed it perfectly. The kid who knocked my pride and joy down was once again barreling up the steps behind us, only this time to be met with a ferocious mud cloud concocted by none other than yours truly. At last victory was ours and we were redeemed. The kid shouted, "You something smells like poop," and I sobbed laughing. My daughter and I went down the slide together and victory was ours. Story 2. 5 rings I have for sisters. My mom is and has always been mean and neglectful of me, only me. I'm older now and recognize her lame attempts at making me feel less than. Taking away her power of it now makes me smile. She still always tries to cut me down and keep me separated from my siblings. My mom, classic hoarder, got her claws into an elderly woman whom has no family. Mom has acquired gold, rings, etc. from this 91-year-old woman, Pat. Pat had 5 heirloom rings. She wanted my mom, Debbie, to give one to each of us girls since she has no family to pass things on to. There was a plan to hand out the rings to us when we were all together. Super Bowl, one of my sis couldn't make it, so the rings weren't handed out since we weren't all there. 2 weeks later, a brunch is planned for a day that I'm slammed. I have 4 kids to take to 2 separate softball practices I coach. There's no way I can make this brunch and get 4 kids to practice by 10:30. They all still go to brunch. Later in our group chat, I see my mom post Pat's contact card and tell everyone to mail a thank you letter to Pat. I wrote, "Thank you for what?" And a sis writes back, "The rings." I ask why they were given out when I wasn't there. My mom hates when I show people how she treats me instead of just staying quiet. Mom responds, "You should have been there." When my mom gets busted doing shady stuff to me, she never wants anyone to know, so she will always private message me and try to get me off the chat so she can bully me. Debbie wants to appear one way to groups or people, so responds to me individually so she can be mean with no one seeing it. Sure enough, I get an instant message off the thread, Debbie asking if I'm home so she can drop off whatever ring is left. No thanks. I'm good. Having the contact card that Debbie posted, I pick up my phone and call Pat and explain who I am. She knows I'm one of Debbie's kids, as my mom will always talk about her 6 kids, but people outside of my siblings don't know how I'm treated by Debbie. Pat and I chat for a while and she's a lovely, old, lonely southern woman. I tell her thank you for giving all my sisters rings, that it was very sweet. She said she was so happy to give them to us as she has no one and is getting very old. She asked about my ring, which one I chose. Here's where I told Pat everything. That I didn't get a ring, that my mom is terrible to me both growing up and now. I wanted Pat know the truth for the next time Debbie calls her trying to act like a saint. Pat says she hopes she can be there for me to atone for my mother's shortcomings. I tell Pat that I'm not only okay and perfectly happy, but a minimalist and don't want anything. The only thing I wanted was to talk and say thank you. I felt so good talking to her. I jumped right back in the group chat and told everyone that I had just gotten off the phone with Pat. You can bet the farm that Debbie's blood went cold reading that I, the mistake child, had called Pat. Debbie, rattled I'm sure, wrote back quickly in GC saying, "Maybe you should wait to call until you have something to say. Like wait to call her until after I have a ring to thank her for." All I responded in the group chat was, "Already called. Thanks." Story 3. Girl teaches a lesson to a rude guy in long line. So not my story, I am just a witness. It happened in my final year of my engineering college. When exam schedule was declared, university would release the exam form which students were supposed to download, fill them and submit them into college. Usually students would get 2 weeks to do this, which is more than enough time. We boys for whatever reason procrastinated until the last date, while girls usually had submitted their forms in the beginning itself. So there was I standing in a line, waiting for my turn to submit the form. There were 2 lines, one for boys and one for girls. Boys' line was pretty long when I joined, about 30, while girls' line was around 5 people. After I spent about 90 minutes in line, I finally got into first 5 in the line. That is when this incident happened. There was a girl at the last in girls' line carrying a clipboard. It had her exam form on it. A guy suddenly came and placed his exam form on her clipboard and told her to submit his exam form. His entire attitude was extremely rude. His words sounded like an order. I thought she was going to slap him, but she didn't. Instead, she took his form and gave him a sweet smile. I thought I misjudged the situation. It is possible to submit other people's form, but you have to go back and stand in line again. I thought maybe girl was his friend or something and was willing to do him a favor. It didn't look like she knew him, but given she had just smiled instead of confronting him, I just ignored it. I put this odd act out of my mind and waited for my turn. When there were two guys in front of me, the girl reached to end of girl's line. She gave clerk her form and had it submitted. She left the line and then she walked towards the rude guy. He looked surprised as she had not rejoined the line. She waved his exam form in front of him, again gave him a sweet smile and just dropped it on the floor. She never said a single word to him. Everybody who was watching understood what she had done. If she had immediately told him to fuck off, he would have just joined the boys' line, which had around 30 people. She made him waste time by keeping his form with her, and by the time she had submitted her own form, boys' line had increased to more than 50 people. Pretty much everyone burst into a laughter. Guy who was so smug before took his form and just left from there. I have no idea when he submitted his form. Probably on later day, which must have cost him late fine. That was best act of revenge I had seen. P.S. There seems to be bit misunderstanding. What everyone was submitting was exam form for a semester. It contained list of subjects student had taken for current semester, both theoretical and practical, as well as any backlog subjects student had from previous semester. Based on what student submitted in this form, he or she would receive hall ticket for the upcoming exam for those subjects. There were no questions or answers in this. This whole thing happens before actual exam. Not submitting this form means you won't get hall tickets and thus won't be allowed to sit in the exams. University does make exception in rare case, but you gotta have a very valid and provable reason for it. As for why there were separate lines for boys and girls, well, it was common practice from where I am. There are separate lines for males and females pretty much any place where there could be crowd or last-minute rush. Story 4. Woman with long hair in my husband's lap. I went with my husband and parents to see a theater performance years ago, a small budget thing in a small theater. The seating was very tight for tall people, but we made the best of it. The issue was the woman sitting in front of my husband with long hair that went to her thighs. When she sat down, she put her hair over the chair and into my very tall husband's lap. He had zero leg room, so anything over the chair was coming in his lap. We thought it was unintentional at first. Nope. He politely asked her to move it. She refused. He then kind of plopped it on the floor beside him. With this, she stood up and proceeded to make a scene witnessed by pretty much everyone. As she sat back down, she threw her head and hair in a way that it hit him in his face. My husband gave up too easily. I should have known. I was paying attention to the play. It wasn't until the end that I realized my husband discreetly spent the entire play knotting her hair. Nothing that would need to be cut out, but it would take her a while to undo. He had been braiding and knotting her hair from the bottom up. Definitely not stylish. A thick knot, a mini braid between two knots. A thick knot, a mini braid rolled into a knot, etc. Thick Boy Scout knots basically, over a foot of them. She hadn't noticed. People in rows behind us that had seen her prior outburst saw it and chuckled. My dad saw it and patted my husband on the back. No one literally said a word. Probably took her a few hours to get the knots out. I'm sure the story she tells is a very different version, and I'm sure she's the innocent victim in her version. I would have felt sorry for her had it not been for her attitude. Anyway, figured my husband came out ahead on that one. Edit. Added note after reading comments. Did not mean anything gross that my husband came out ahead. Was referring to the situation. No innuendo intended, lol. Story 5. I wasn't allowed a 1-pound air freshener, but expensive face creams were a necessity. Originally posted in Ask UK, but thought it was good fodder for this sub too. I had an ex who bought a house and asked me to move in with her. She then decided that the job we both did was too much and quit without consulting me, meaning that I had to pay her mortgage. She then got a job at a supermarket, filling shelves on minimum wage, at around 1/5 of her original earnings. Money was tight, but we survived. Walking around town a few months later, I decided to buy a Homer Simpson air freshener for £1, only to be told that we couldn't afford something so frivolous, we should only buy necessities. Fair enough. I put it back and that was that. When we got home, we emptied the shopping out and there were 2 small jars of face cream that cost over £50 each. I picked one up and asked necessity, and was told yes. Do you want me to look like a fucking hag? I started planning my escape there and then. I spoke to a solicitor and he basically told me that the bad news was that nothing was in my name, but the good news was that nothing was in my name. I stopped paying all the bills including the mortgage, and a few weeks later, I found out she was also cheating on me. I begged her to let me stay for a few more weeks until I found somewhere else, ended up being 6 weeks, and promised to keep paying the bills until I left. When I moved all my stuff out, I presented her with a pile of unpaid bills including 3 missed mortgage payments and told her that her new squeeze darn the security guard can pay them. If she'd just been honest and not used me as a meal ticket, I would have been happy to pack up and move out. Fuck you, Joe, you deserved it. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.